And the thing is, in this lifetime, what men have to realize is that it's sometimes hard to provide and be present. So you got to make sure you make the impact when you're present and make sure that it's a quality time. And I don't think enough. Some people get so much caught up on the bag, they forget that they're leaving the next generation behind by getting to the bag.
He's done miracles on me. Back again, he's done. Back again, he's done miracles. Back again, he's done miracles on me.
Welcome back to For the Love of Man. I am your host, Song, and we have Dr. Sam. I should have started this way. Keith, Shannon, and Marcus. All right, guys. So today, our conversation, we're just going to hop right in it. We are talking about fatherhood. And this is actually a topic that my brother King wanted to address again. I know we've talked about it before, but I'm going to let him share what's on his heart, and then we're going to start the conversation.
Yeah, I'm noticing that in this time that it's very, very vital with how life is and how fathers being in children's lives to mold and shape them is very important. So yeah, I definitely wanted to address a few things as far as, I don't want to use the word address, but really talk about basically fathers in general and experiences that we have and how we could actually better assist people who don't have fathers or either reiterate the importance that a father could bring into people's lives.
I like that. So I know for you, well, and for me, but you being a male, growing up without your father, but being raised by your uncle and your grandfather, what were some of the challenges that you saw growing up and dealing with your identity?
Just knowing who I am. You know, I know who I am from my mother's standpoint and my uncles and all of them, the Stanford's aspect, but actually being named after somebody that's not your actual father and then learning who your real father is, but not having that opportunity to actually have a conversation or see, you know, the true essence of the story or where it came from. It's like your whole story is being rewritten when you start learning about these things. So I think the great part about it, I wouldn't always say it was bad because it was a lot more great than it was bad because my identity got molded and shaped through the men who were in my life. And that's why I did, based upon my grandmother before she passed, did the name change to carry on the lineage of the ones and the men who were in my life and still is from my uncle's word being my grandfather. Because some of the great experiences I have that most people need to understand, where men come into your life, they mold and shape you literally how to have structure. And I don't think a lot of people always respect that structure until you're older, how much it gives you a head start in life. Like just the fact of, I know Shannon and Marcus was looking across the way, like, you know how to fix cars? Like, yeah, man, I was fixing cars and doing stuff for a while because all the men in my life, like literally in our backyard was like a mechanic shop. They literally were lifting up, changing rotors and brakes and swapping out alternators and rebuilding engines and all of that. And I literally had to be there, you know, to do it. And then when my cars used to break down and I didn't have the money to pay a mechanic, they started showing me how to be hands-on on that. So that's how I literally learned a lot of the skills that I had. And then my uncles, like my Uncle Michael coached me in basketball. So having that, you know, in my life, even though I've learned a great work ethic from all my uncles and the men in my life, that's one thing I always see is that they always provide. They always provide. And the thing is, in this lifetime, what men have to realize is that it's sometimes hard to provide and be present. So you got to make sure you make the impact when you're present and make sure that it's a quality time. And I don't think enough. Some people get so much caught up on the bag, they forget that they're leaving the next generation behind by getting to the bag. You got to have a balance, and that balance is always not easy. And sometimes you may go get it because some things are behind to provide, but then you got to swoop back and then you got to be present as well. So it's really always a constant balance. And I know that I've talked, but I want to also let the other men and talk about their experiences as far as Shannon and Marcus about what things were intricate in their lives as well, as far as the men who were there in their lives.
I want to throw something in there really quickly because there's other things that are there also, and I've really been noticing this as I've gotten older and pretty much gotten to that point in life where I've always been observant, but my focus of observance normally keys in on certain things in life, whatever that may mean. So as it deals with young men and needing fathers in their lives, even kids, young men or women needing fathers in their lives, like at this point in my life, I see it as being an even more important thing, I think, than I've ever seen or ever really realized it was before. Just because I see the differences that are there in majority of men and women, i.e. women having that emotional stake in life and that emotional foundation in life. Sometimes not having a ton of logic to go along with it when that emotion is happening. But then I see myself and other men in my life where there's a lot more of the logic that's going on, not a ton of the emotional state going on. So the contrast of both of those things is there. And it seems to me it's more necessary than you might have thought it was before, because you have that foundation of that emotion that's there when it comes to things. And sometimes, I have enough female friends, like I watch them having conversations with their sons and that emotion coming through, but the logic of the situation not coming through with it. So they're not catching it. They're just feeling like you're getting on them or whatever it may be, or they're just not receiving whatever it is that you're trying to give them. Doesn't mean that what you're trying to give them isn't necessary. It's just that they're just not receiving it for whatever reason. But then you have a man that comes into their life that they can trust, that's there, that's logical, that's everything that they need in that aspect that can speak to them. And they're like, oh, okay. And I see that whole, how come you could just say that? And I can't believe you just say that and you just receive it, blah, blah, blah. It's just because I'm his mom and, whatever. And it's like, someone, it may be because you're his mom. Someone, it might just because you're a woman that's coming from an emotional standpoint of what it is. And I just came from an A plus B equals C standpoint. We're not going to tolerate D. So I need you to get a hold of your emotion, and I need you to move in this aspect in this way and a little bit less in this way. So we can get you balanced, because some young men, they're more in the emotional aspect because they are around more women than they are other men. And they don't know how to navigate that yet. So then they come into the aspect of the things happening in their lives. They're being really emotional about it. They don't know how to be. They don't have that balance just yet. They just haven't learned it. They just haven't gotten it together yet. So having that man, hopefully in that life that isn't overly emotional about the things that go on and overly emotional about the things that they see and deal with and whatever, they can look into that situation, see it from the logical standpoint and speak to the A plus B equals C of it. And hopefully speak to that A plus B equals C inside of that young man, whatever it may be. But also, if it's a daughter, same thing, like coming from that logical aspect of it and not all of the emotional aspect of it. So they can hopefully identify with both sides of it as they get older, because during that 10 to 15 maybe range, they just doing whatever, just trying to figure it out, just like we all were, but hopefully as they get on later on in life, they realize, okay, I need to have that emotion because emotion is important, but I need to have that logic because the logic is important too.
Yeah, and that makes sense because just to speak about our dynamics and our situation, because if I'm following you correctly, situation like with me and my sister and working with my nephew Jeremiah, because she was just like, bruh, like, dude ain't listening, like he ain't getting it. And I was trying to explain, like, hey, sister's at a point, it's no disrespect. He needs your love and to know that you're there, but it just hits different when it comes from a man, because it's almost like it's at a point where they need to see themselves. and they don't see it. And you know what I'm saying? So I get what you're saying about the emotional logic. And I was like, but I also see what you mean about balance. Cause I'm like, he still needs that because my nephew's real analytical. So he's like, kind of like shrug you off and like, he'll say some stuff, cut you deep. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, yeah, you need your mama. Cause I don't think society go, you know what I'm saying? You're going to get Kanye West out here. They going to push you to the side for being too honest, bro. But, you know, you got to find that filter and that love and stuff like that. But leading and guiding, we've seen a lot of progress in him just from me being here and stuff like that. Him getting up and getting stuff done and doing a great job. And, what I see too, young men respect a man who's consistent in their life. And that's one thing. I've been the one man that's consistent. He's the one child who hasn't had his father in his life. You know what I'm saying? More times than, you know what I'm saying, not. So being there and being very active in his life was very important to me because I mean, I could do so much from 3 hours, 2.5 hours away, you know, but, him being here, I've seen his grades improve because they wasn't doing so good. It was just kind of like he was giving up. But, you know, oftentimes as young men, when we don't have guidance and somebody to express like, yo, what you're doing right now is going to affect so many other things and aspect of your life. I was like, even if we don't believe in the school system, can you follow through and complete something? Even when it's hard, you know, so teaching those principles is why it's so important for men to be in their lives. But excuse me, I know MJ speak, but yeah, I feel you, Shannon.
Absolutely valuable. You know, the presence of powerful male leadership is crucial. Because in growing up in a situation where my mom did everything she could, but she could not raise a man. Right? Like she did not have the capability of raising me to be a man. Now, one of the hardest things was, unfortunately, I didn't have a connection with uncles and my grandfathers, that I sought out coaches, but, I was so tainted by men's inability to be consistent that I wouldn't have received their guidance anyway. Cause similar to your nephew, I'm very logical and analytical and aware. Yeah. And like any inconsistencies or cracks in your armor, I won't trust it. So the inability to be consistent means that you don't have value in my life. So you can't impart wisdom on me because I don't know that you're going to be around. So the fact that you're able to take that role is a big deal, right? And it's helped me a lot because now I had to take a step back, and I'm grateful because I believe we're a generation that is not willing to take on the same burdens that our parents may have taken on, where we're like, oh no, we're going to make it work. We're going to sacrifice this just so we can create this environment where it's like, you get to make those sacrifices, but you also get to make the investments, and your investment is presence, guidance, open and honest communication, right? Like we're a generation where that shit. We're legit a generation where that do as I say, not as I do doesn't fly.
Yeah.
Because as we were growing up, we we're like, nah, that don't make sense. And now that we're adults, we're like, yo, that don't even work. Like you didn't know what you was doing.
Right.
So now we get to have different level of conversation with kids, and when you're present in their life, you get to be super present. This is also why, like, I don't date women with children, because I know I'm going to take your kids in and I'm going to be present in their life. And if we break up, that means I break up with them. And I don't want that lineage of inconsistency from a male presence to come into your life, because that's hurtful. And that's the one thing I respect my mom for not doing. When we moved across the country and it was just me and her, she didn't date that entire process. And I'm not telling single moms not to date. Disclaimer. Just be careful with who you date. And I asked her in college, I'm like, well, like, why didn't you really go on dates? She goes, first off, you wouldn't have played that. Second, I didn't want to bring you, because I was like, that nigga ain't gonna make it. You're all in the bed. Yes. This is a really important conversation. I'm grateful that we're in it. Because I remember the first time this guy like was trying to court her, and I was like, he ain't gonna make it. And she was like, well, he just got here. I'm like, he ain't gonna be around. A week later, she was like, well, he was right. What did you see? Right? Because I was observant, but I also know the caliber of woman my mom is. And so she was like, I'm just not going to really entertain this, because I know you don't need that inconsistency in your life. So it's really important the value you place on the presence of men in your life, and then the caliber of men that you choose. Right? Like, it's just a big deal. And for the fellas out there, I'm grateful, because even when I look at celebrity, like especially athletes, as a basketball player and a fan, I look at a generation of men now, and I mean, I'll just use LeBron as an example, right? LeBron has been forefront with his kids, and we've seen it from start to finish. We can use the Steph Currys, the Dwayne Wades, right? It doesn't matter what you think about like their children's choices. We've been a generation of men that are like, not only am I going to be a present father, I'm going to be there for everything that I can be there for. And I think it's super important because that guidance you talked about, that value of leadership can't come from anyone else. Like it comes because the men in your life are supposed to set the standard. Women are then able to create that environment of love and compassion and understanding. But you need men for the guidance and the structure. That's why it also bothers me to see so many men with, I caught this one when I was about to say chastness, with female tendencies, perpetrating male roles because they're tainting the water. And it's a big deal. So this conversation and this understanding is really important.
So, one of the things that you said made me think about when you're talking about your mom and when she chose not to date and different things, brought me back to something that you said in a previous recording when we were talking about when you had the conversation with mom about her, or grandma and grandpa raising you, or Uncle Michael, Auntie Shelley raising you, so that you would have that consistency and you wouldn't be around those different men because she knew they wouldn't be good for you, which is amazing seeing from a little boy's state, so that you would have that consistency. But I think that it's extremely important for a female too, because a lot of times girls grow up into women thinking, oh, I don't need a man, I don't need a father, I don't need this because I didn't have that, or I just saw this back and forth. And I remember when I was growing up, a lot of what I saw was like, the different people, and it got to the point where I just was like, I was a lot like my son. I was like, I don't trust none of y'all. I remember telling one of the guys, he was like, blah, 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 I don't understand why this, and I'm sorry, things are ending with me and your mom. And I was like, don't even worry about it, that's just the way it is. I don't get attached to none of y'all. So it gives you that mindset. So then, as I got older, I was like, I don't really connect with people like that or connect with men like that because I didn't see it as a kid. So it's been for me, being a parent, retraining myself and healing from those parental wounds of not having that father figure. And I have my father in my life, but he wasn't always there. And so that inconsistency leaked over into relationships. And I work to make sure that this does not pour out onto my children now, because I don't want them to grow up thinking, well, having a father is not important. Because I have had that conversation with Jeremiah, where he's like, I don't need nobody to catch a football with. And I was like, but that's not the only thing that you get from a father is somebody to throw a football with.
Yeah, exactly. Wholeheartedly. But it's interesting, like when I pay attention when I'm like watching kids now, and that's what I mean by shifting into different areas of life. I pay a lot more attention to certain things, like when they say certain things like that, like, oh, I don't need nobody to throw a football with. They're going into they're a child, but they're going into their inner child at that point and saying something that's important to them. I wish I had somebody to throw a football with. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't need nobody to throw a football with. Like, that's why that thing comes out.
Right.
So it's important trying to make it unimportant. Yeah,
and that's, from a psych perspective, like that's cognitive dissonance, right? Like we want one thing, with the other thing's the reality. So we have to convince ourselves one or the other so that we're in an equal state, because no one likes to be unbalanced. And so we're going to say like, well, I don't care about that because we know we can't get that. So it's easier to say I don't care versus sit there and long and wish for something that's never going to happen, or we feel like the time has passed.
Yeah. One of the, what I was going to explain too, like most people have to understand our generation growing up was the generation where either your dad is a good chance that you get one or the other. You could have been a latchkey kid if your dad was working over the time. Yeah. Your dad could have been in gangs or violence because there was a lot of that going on during that time. Crack, so could have been smoked out. So it was a lot of things that disrupted our community as a whole that pulled fathers out of the household. And you got to think about it. If your dad get caught on a drug, so if they incarcerated for just a decade, that's 10 years of your life. Your most crucial point is from when you're born to 5. And then let's not mention if that's from somewhere 5 to 15. By the time you 15, you like, I ain't even trying to hear what you said. Like you made your source, you made your bed, you lay in it. But we also came from a generation where it's like what Marcus said. It's like, what was the word that you said? It's pretty much like you don't speak up to adults, but you listen to what you told. Like I forgot what the saying is. But what it is that people don't speak up. So a lot of people were getting molested during that time, and when you're supposed to be seen and not heard. So you're supposed to be seen and not heard. And what happened in those times is that a lot of things wasn't getting expressed and handled. We were just sweeping them under the rug. You're not going to counseling or therapy. You're just trying to smoke or drink, and you just self-medicating. So a lot of that stuff went on. So I love the fact that people at least are getting the help that they need to at least stop generational curses and be as much present as possible. So to the fathers who are trying to get the help and stuff, because it is very hard at times being a man in the world and trying to juggle everything that you need to do with as far as making sure that you're keeping your significant other one happy, making sure you're parenting your kids. And not to say that it's not hard for women, but I'm just speaking from a male's perspective. And making sure when the kids are not listening, making sure that they're still following in line, making sure that you can be there and help them with their grades. And a lot of times most people don't have work at home jobs, so they're outside of the house, and you still got to be able to manage that. And one of the books I read was Destiny by T.D. Jakes, and he talked about how in those seasons that some of those ones are going to drop. It's like the teeter, it keeps teetering, and you got to go back and catch the other one. And while you're catching the other one, you can't be providing if you like always present. So, both are very important. So you got to find that balance. And I heard Shannon talk about balancing the life, and that's one of the things that was great is that people are working a lot more together than they used to. Because, when we grew up, your aunt couldn't stay with your other aunt, or this person couldn't stay with this person. Like, they couldn't really find a way to make things work in one household. I used to watch it in the Hispanic community. They have 3 families in a 3-bedroom. And you start seeing them come up from Pintos to Mercedes and Escalades, and they go by the house, do it over again, and working together. And that's where now in this community, I could see our people starting to work together to start doing things so we can get ahead. Because if you just look at a household of 3 families, that's over $1 million in a household. You could definitely say for the most average person, you could say that if it's like 3 actual families, 2-parent household, all that, you could probably reach $1 million. If not, let's just say $500,000. Even if it's that could get you so much distance. And with inflation and things going on, you got to find a way to beat out the system that's trying to ultimately make you fail.
Make sure you subscribe and come back next week for the continuation of this conversation.
Side note, because this came up for me a second ago. Ladies, if you have a father that is trying to be present in his children's lives, stop being the headache and the barrier that prevents that from happening. We are setting our kids up for failure. Now, ladies, if you have fathers that ain't and they're not showing up, that's different.